Missiles. Missiles are awesome. Who here doesn't appreciate a good old missile salvo? The beeps and whirs racking up all the explosives that are going to be unstoppably launched at some unsuspecting MT or hunkered down arena opponent. Armored Core has a lot of missiles. High action missiles, scatter missiles, burst missiles, Giga missiles, Kojima missiles, pursuit missiles, and of course the series' most ubiquitous small missile. This list today isn't going over only the strongest missiles. That would be the Giga missile. You're welcome. List over. Just kidding. But a list of the missiles that have the best functionality, or maybe just the best spread of damage, utility, consistency, or maybe just a really unique gimmick. If you're looking for missiles, you've come to the right place. This is the Ravens Cortex Top 10 Missiles in the Armored Core franchise. We're going to start off the list with our number 10 spot, and probably least missile-y missile on the list, by selecting the EL-PW-01 Elcano Needle Missile Launcher from Armored Core 6. The Needle Missile Launcher might not even be correctly called a missile launcher, since there is no actual explosive payload. But the game says they are missiles, so on to the list they go. These things bore through a target at an exceptionally high speed, making them good as a follow-up punish weapon if your opponent quick boosts to dodge some other attack of yours, like a pursuit missile or grenade round. The Needle Missile actually has quite high ACS buildup, and an extraordinarily high speed, making them perfect as a follow-up, especially since their accumulation impact penalty is quite small, meaning that their ACS buildup, if they connect, will not decay immediately. Unfortunately for the launcher, the reload time and lock-on time are both not great, to say the least, with a reload time and lock-on time of just over 4 seconds. If you miss, you'll be paying the price. These things are definitely a long-range sniper tool rather than a brawling pressure missile. That, however, doesn't detract from their utility, rather than a good general use weapon. The Kinetic Needle Missile Launcher from AC6 is more like a scalpel, another tool in the toolbox for snipers who want to punish dodge-happy opponents, much like the Railgun Fact from the 4th Gen Armored Core series. And even though it may not have a payload, the Armored Core 6 Needle Missile Launcher strikes true for our number 10 spot. Number 9 on this list is a type of missile that has a bit of a weird title for what it actually does, and instead of selecting a single entry, this one will function like our next entry and cover an entire type with the Pursuit Missile subclass of missile across multiple generations. Pursuit missiles have traditionally been a 4-shot deployment type weapon that was much more prevalent in generations 2 and 3, but had their designation of Pursuit Missile reattributed to missiles of the slower variety that would track and literally pursue a target for long periods of time, their pressure and mental load that they required being their strength. These are not those. Pursuit missiles in Generation 2 and 3 were pods that players would launch, and then the pod would fire out missiles in a random direction towards multiple or likely a single target. These things were quite heavy for the time, and not the easiest to use effectively, usually only having 4 pods, which were clearly shown on the dual backslot mounted apparatus. These things were quite unique at the time for being a fire and forget missile weapon. Those didn't really exist back then. AS missiles didn't really become popular until Generation 4, and these guys feel like the great-grandpa of those things. The pod itself was also quite a potent weapon. If something did get too close to you, you could just throw the whole missile pod at a target, and they would immediately overheat and take pretty much the whole payload of missiles in one fell swoop. It probably wasn't the most effective use of the weapon, but it did do the trick in a pinch. Armored Core 6 did eventually bring this missile back with the Furlong Dynamics BML GL P29 CNT Container Missile Launcher, which pretty much recreated the old Pursuit missiles in their entirety, with a few more shots in the newest generation of the series. Pursuit missiles aren't the best missiles in the game, but they are certainly fun to use, and their unique application gives them a spot on our list at number 9. Number 8 on this list is definitely going to be the most broad of the missile choices on this list, and that is because of its just amazing utility in the game space that it was designed in. Armored Core 5's shoulder-mounted missiles of the kinetic energy, chemical energy, and thermal energy variety all occupy the number 8 spot. To justify this choice, I want to point at the general design space of the 5th generation games. By implementing a third damage type in the game, flexibility was encouraged for first-time playthroughs. If a pilot, however, wanted to run one thermal and one kinetic energy on each arm, so that they could run double thermal energy or kinetic energy weapons in each hand, would completely lack a chemical energy weapon in this scenario. But luckily, we have our shoulder-mounted utility slot missiles to fill in whatever offensive gap we don't have equipped. This sort of flexibility isn't really something that the other games could reliably reproduce, since it's uniquely a Generation 5 scenario. The shoulder missiles, of course, didn't just need to be gap filler either. Players that wanted to go all in on a spec would be able to triple load a weapon type because of these missile launchers as well. Of course, the shoulder missile launchers did come with the downside of players losing their ever-important utility slot of reserve magazines, missile interceptors, or subcomputers, so it wasn't just a free damage enhancer. But if the shoulder slot was used by a missile, the offensive power of the AC was increased by allowing a third active weapon to be used, usually in a fire and forget manner as well. While it's hard to pick a specific type of missile launcher, plasma, chemical, or kinetic in Generation 5, their exceptional utility for damage resistance adaptation gets them our number 8 spot. Coming in at number 7 is the Zinc Vertical Kojima Missile Launcher from the Generation 4 game, Armored Core 4 Answer. A missile launcher from Taurus, unlocked by completing the mission Defeat Unknown Next plus no count on the free play hard difficulty, the Zinc is actually used by one of the ACs in the mission itself, the bonus Missile Carnival. Let's put on a show. Man himself, PQ, and its effective damage is put on full display during the mission you unlock it in as well. Players that are a bit more gung-ho with their movement may find their HP pools absolutely obliterated if smashed by the Zinc missile, and if they aren't directly hit, they will definitely be on the back foot afterwards once their primal armor is stripped away from the nearby Kojima explosion. The Zinc vertical launcher shares its destructive potential as a Kojima weapon with its other Kojima weapon brethren by dealing an absurd amount of single-shot volley damage. The fact that the Zinc is a vertical missile is neither a negative or a positive, but is highly dependent on the context of the weapon's usage. In an open field with a clear launch trajectory, the Zinc is amazing, as it can be launched while quick boosting to increase the missile's initial velocity, allowing it to close in on targets that may not expect the missile to move as fast as it does. However, in a more confined area or in a position where the pilot can't get a clear vertical launch trajectory, the Zinc will only accomplish obliterating the player's primal armor and potentially their AP if fired carelessly. While the Zinc is an effective weapon on its own, it doesn't do anything too special in the grand scheme of things. That doesn't diminish how good of a weapon it is, but at the end of the day, it is just another big missile for how cool and effective that actually is. Number 6 on this list is the highly destructive cousin of the previous entry, with the Cress Industries CWM Titan large missile launcher from the Generation 3 game, Armored Core Silent Line. The Titan is just that, a Titan. It has an absolutely enormous amount of damage potential, slammed into that slow-moving, exceptionally good tracking warhead. Rocking over 4 times the damage of the next tier down medium missiles, the CWM Titan is a fun weapon to use against ultra-low mobility targets that cannot outrun its terrifying aura farming advance. Lighting pretty much any target it hits on theoretical fire, the Titan's damage output is misleading, as anything that does get hit will be almost assuredly put into output down status, allowing even more damage over time to ravage the poor soul who got smacked by the warhead. The Titan is not without downsides, however. The missile is extremely prone to being shot down by cores with built-in missile interception devices, and even more susceptible to ACs that are equipped with extension slot missile interceptors. Although the large missile can resist them, decoys can also pose a problem, and the infuriatingly low ammo count can make you feel like you're rolling the dice every time you hit the launch key. On top of this, the Titan is just that, titanic, and it has the weight to match. Weighing in at a whopping 1,520 weight points, this thing weighs more than the dual backslot missile launchers from the same generation, which has well over 5 times the ammo count, albeit not firing large missiles. The Titan in Silent Line can also do catastrophic damage to parts if it makes contact to an AC, dealing enormous damage to weapon parts and potentially stripping them from an opponent if you have already landed a strike or two in the battle. This feature, of course, extends to the part damage mechanic of Last Raven, where the missile launcher has near identical functionality. The Titan, of course, does have one more feature that is a huge upside and huge downside: the tracking of the missile. Large missiles tend to have really slow speed, but really high tracking in Generation 1 to 3.5, which is both a boon and a downside, as the missiles can be guided directly into the floor, and firing the missile from below your target, or standing on the floor, was not a good idea, as when the pilot returned to Earth, the missile would slam into the ground, generating a huge explosion at the feet of the launcher. The Titan isn't the best of all the missile launchers, but we need to have ample big boy representation on this list, so it gets the number 6 slot. Blowing up and one-shotting the competition in this list's number 5 entry is the Giga missile from the Generation 5 games Armored Core 5 and Armored Core Verdict Day. Look, I was trying to not always have an ultimate weapon on these lists, since they tend to be the absolute hardest hitting things across all the games, but I know you guys wanted to see one, and frankly, this one is my favorite. I personally don't feel like one-shot, limited-time usage weapons fit well in the whole Armored Core theme of the series, but I'm gonna make an exception for the Giga missile, and maybe another one on in another list. This thing freaking rules. The Generation 5 entry isn't the most practical of weapons across the series, but at this point, who bloody cares? The Giga missile shares characteristics with all of its ultimate weapon cousins in Generation 5, in that it occupies both back base slots of the weapon, is deployed and has a limited usage time period, as well as having the capability to absolutely wipe something off the face of this polluted planet. The Giga missile is fun to use, but since I don't have as much experience with the Verdict Day online scene, can't really comment on its usage as an online weapon. However, the unlock requirements of hunting down multiple Zodiac pilots can be a fun little unlock challenge for players who want to use it in Armored Core 5 exclusively. But offline, the Giga missile is an absolute blast. Pun only partially intended. There isn't really too much else to say. It's a big freaking missile. The biggest missile. But who cares? This thing rocks. So it gets our number 5 spot. Moving up to the number 4 slot, I'll be focusing more on utility and usability rather than raw damage output and the big explosions that activate neurons in my brain that love excessively large detonations. These things still deal lots of damage, but their main utility isn't just their enormous output. Our number 4 missile launcher on this list is the Generation 4 scatter missiles from Armored Core 4 and 4 Answer. Scatter missiles are a rather lightweight back-mounted missile unit that fires a shotgun blast of tiny attack missiles that have adequate homing capabilities. Scatter missiles were great for 2 separate things: applying pressure to targets who had their primal armor still up, and absolutely wrecking targets, especially immobile ones, that are caught flat-footed by the wave of missiles. Much more difficult to see than pretty much every other missile in the generation, although sometimes you wanted to absolutely intimidate your opponent with something like the muzzle shell. These things were great at sneaking in and smoking targets that may not be paying attention. Their pattern wasn't too difficult to dodge, the weapon speed was slower than a lot of other missiles, and the overall fuel amount wasn't so great, as these things could fall back to Earth if your target was quicker and knew they were coming. These things were absolutely amazing on the move, however, and were a very weight-efficient use of a back weapon space if your AC was smaller and lacked important stats like stability for larger back-mounted weapons like sniper cannons or grenade launchers. This unfortunately would conflict with the design space of the weapon a little bit. The scatter missiles would require a lock-on, and sometimes in 4-answer multiplayer, maintaining a lock-on, especially during evasive maneuvers with a small, quick next, could be difficult. The spread missiles also had a quite obvious trait in that the missiles spread out. Groundbreaking. I know, but this spread pattern of missiles did have a power of its own. The missile's payload was small, but if the target was dodging, the wide pattern of the missiles could clip a target. 20% of missiles hitting is better than a missile not hitting at all, and only if it had one warhead. These things were also phenomenal being fired at point blank, functioning just as an improvised shotgun if need be, and this sort of non-traditional usage, coupled with the fact that the weapon was quite powerful in the early 4-answer online days, grants it our number 4 spot. Number 3 are the small missile weapon arms from Generation 2, Armored Core 2 and Armored Core Another Age. Weapon arms occupy a weird spot for a lot of fans. Their power and ammo loads are usually quite acceptable for their weight point usage, but of course come with the horrendous downside of terrible defensive characteristics and removing your access to laser blades in lower gens. Unless of course you use the laser blade arms, but that comes with its own set of problems. The small missile arms in Generation 2 are actually quite fantastic, especially in the Armored Core 2 arena. They had absolutely ridiculously quick lock-on times, which made them super effective for hit and run tactics, also negating the optional part that would interrupt your lock-on. Players would very easily be able to lock on and retreat, all the while pummeling their target. This made areas like Falna Crater super good for some of the more difficult fights, like Ares or Funeral Mast, where you could dip behind terrain, lock up, then wait for your opponent to move to a better firing angle, then launch. Again though, like stated earlier, this made your AC significantly more fragile, providing no defensive stats and increasing your armor point amount by very small, by arm part standards, amounts. The missile's firing arc was great, usually straight at a target and very close together, meaning that one quad lock almost always resulted in 8 hits, not even including relation missile add-ons. The damage shouldn't be underestimated either. These things were, like most missiles in the series, great at applying heat pressure, and their damage was superb for the cost. Mission running with these could be difficult, and smart weapon usage was important, which was ironically made a bit more difficult by the fact that the lock-ons were so quick. If you knew the target you were shooting at only took 2 missiles to kill, an MT for example, sometimes you'd have to move your enormous lock area to the side and snap a shot off at a weird angle if you wanted to actually not waste ammunition. This also made it tough to use sometimes in tight quarters, since the missiles were so quick. If your target was fast or small, you might just not be able to keep up with your opponent. These downsides were pretty easily accommodated for with some basic AC design. Having a weapon that could take out MTs while you save your arms for the harder targets wasn't too difficult, and going all in on an armed missile build was actually quite a fun experience if there weren't 50 plus enemies in a mission. This is a common downside for lots of the gun arms though, and doesn't really hold it back from getting onto this missile list podium. In our silver medal position is the WX S800GF dual backslot missile launcher from the first generation Armored Core, Master of Arena. While available in the first game in the series as a hidden weapon located in the top section of the mission Retake Air Cleaner, this mission is purchasable in Master of Arena for just over 91,000 credits from the onset, and is arguably one of the most efficient non-Karasawa arena weapons in the entire game. The strength of this dual backslot missile launcher is the absolutely punishing amount of missiles it can fire on a single lock-on. 6, 3 times higher than its dual-shot, 500 weight point more expensive cousin, the WX S800-2. These missiles are exceptionally efficient at clearing out enemy ACs in the arena, and raw offensive power per salvo can be difficult to ignore for pilots who want to absolutely crush their opponents as quickly as possible. The amount of missiles launched is both a blessing and a curse for the player. Having only an ammo count of 60, that means the pilot must be a bit more cautious with their salvos, as if they fire them without pause, they may find their dual backslot ammo completely depleted without finishing off their opponent. While the arena running potential is strong, the mission running ability is poor. Each salvo costs 3,000 credits, meaning that if you fire the entire rack of missiles, you are racking up almost 30,000 credits in cost, which will wipe out pretty much your entire pay for a mission by itself if you aren't careful. On top of this, short of massive MTs, bosses, or enemy ACs, pretty much nothing in the game actually requires a 6-shot of missiles to clear off the field, and your overkill potential rivals that of weapons like the grenade launcher or back-mounted laser cannons. This is also exacerbated by the fact that the WX S800GF takes up both of your back slots. Your right arm weapon better be something efficient, since you don't have access to rockets or back-mounted energy weapons to save on costs. All of these downsides, though, pale in comparison to the ludicrous damage output this thing can provide. If you haven't tried it yet in your Master of Arena runs, where its enormous salvo cost isn't a factor, give it a whirl. You won't be disappointed, and for that, we give it the silver medal today. At number 1 on our list of missiles in the Armored Core franchise are the exceptionally popular Generation 3.5 micromissiles, developed by Kisaragi. Hey, a Kisaragi weapon made it on the list, and not for being bad. Good for you, Kisaragi. Now I know what you're thinking. RC, micro missiles, when the Giga missile and large missiles are so low on the list? Well, dear viewer, micro missiles are fantastic, and if you have not tried them, I highly suggest you do so. Great for all of the same reasons that the WX S800GF was in the previous entry, but at a third of the weight and double the ammo if you rock 2 of them, micro missiles benefit greatly by having a relay launcher equipped with them. Relay launchers being those extension slot add-ons that fire missiles alongside your other missile systems. When paired with a micro missile, you can have a wall of almost 11 if your relay launcher is a 4-shot variant, or you could opt to go for the vertical version if you know that you will be primarily doing anti-AC content. This is absolutely devastating to anti-missile systems that are usually quite effective counters to other missile-based attacks, but you still had no recourse really to enemies who used decoy-based systems. If it wasn't already clearly stated earlier, micromissiles are very strong because they only require a single lock-on for each salvo, which makes them quite good for pilots who either don't have great target tracking skills or need to squeeze off a salvo in between bunny hops over cover. Like every other missile system on this list, except for maybe the Giga missile, the micros are dodged in much the same way, usually by moving at a 45-degree angle upwards, which is also conveniently how the missiles in the Balteus fight from Armored Core 6 were dodged. If a salvo of micros did connect though, heat application was really good, especially since if one hit, most likely the other 6 would as well, not to mention the relation missile launches. The damage wasn't anything to scoff at either. If a target was slow or unable to effectively shut down your onslaught, they would be eating enormous chunks of damage, not even including the output down bonus damage. Micros weren't just good for AC on AC combat, however. Their larger ammo pool, 10 salvos per backslot, made them quite good at mission running, especially if anything in the mission was a larger target and could eat all the shots in a single salvo with ease. This is of course coupled with the fact that they could be fired on the move, which isn't saying too much, as almost all these missiles in this list could be fired on the move. That is why we take missiles after all. While I know that micros aren't the be-all end-all of missile types, they do have a few downsides, one of them being their enormous energy drain, of course coupled with the fact that they eat decoys for breakfast. I haven't met many players in forums over the years who didn't like using micro missiles at some point in their last Raven or Nexus playthroughs, and for that reason, I'm giving micro missiles the gold today with our number 1 spot. That's the Raven's Cortex top 10 missiles in the franchise. Were there any missiles on here that you love to use? Maybe you're a bit bummed that your favorite missile didn't make it on here? Let me know which ones you use in any of the games. I'd love to hear it. I still got lots of ideas for you guys, some more essay type stuff. You guys really seem to like those ones. And of course, I got a lot more top 10 ideas. You guys have been great for giving me lots of feedback on what you actually want to see. So, as always, Ravens, I'll see you in the arena, and I'll catch you on the next one.